We stayed a full week in Boulder. I spent time with some of my best friends, Melissa, who I know from Asheville, who absolutely shreds the violin, and Mitch and Courtney up in Fort Collins. I feel like I've known them for lifetimes. They truly are my Rocky Mountain family. The beauty of Boulder is dramatically impressive. The beer is top-notch. In fact, I'd say the Front Range is the Napa Valley of craft beer. The people in Boulder are a whole other story. We were calling the place Bold Angeles by the time we left. Gigs were okay. The tipping was abhorrent. From there we headed to Taos, New Mexico, one of my favorite American hideouts. The high desert atmosphere is hypnotic and seductive. They call it the land of enchantment. I agree. The mesa's vast, sage as far as the eye can see with the occasional juniper tree. Every time the wind blows, you're literally getting a spiritual cleansing. The Sangre de Cristo Range towers around the mesa, snow-capped and magnificent. The town is completely adobe. Even the corporate stores. We drank tequila that night in an old adobe back alley dive appropriately titled The Alley. The place was charming and dangerous at the same time. We played pool and mingled with the locals. I felt like we knew everyone in Taos by day 2. The people were so mellow and welcoming. I might come back for good someday, if I can shake this itch to ramble. If only I met someone in Taos that melted my heart. Maybe a musician that shared my passion for the woods, solitude, and serenity. Could my restless heart ever be tamed? The next day we drove out onto the middle of the mesa. We hiked down into the canyon looking into the Rio Grande. We were in search of some hot springs down by the river. When we finally found them, there was one nude old man laying ass up in the sun with 2 giant fluffy white dogs napping on either side. We soaked for what seemed like minutes but turned out to be hours. As I soaked in the 98-degree water, a hawk soared in circles overhead. We lay back fully submerged except our faces. I was falling in love with the land of enchantment. I smiled and thought about how everyone I know is at work right now. We played back-to-back shows at the Adobe Bar in downtown Taos to some extremely enthusiastic folks. They were dancing up a storm, hooting and hollering. The tipping was amazing, as was the merch sales. I really didn't want to leave. We wrapped up our visit with an impromptu show at Taos Mesa Brewing. The place looked like an earthship, and it was in the middle of nowhere, shadowed by the giant snow-capped mountains. Lucas and I were again feeling like we were in another country. The folks were super sweet and supportive, as par for New Mexico. By the time we left, we felt like we knew everyone in town. We made tacos and drank beer in the parking lot that night in the camper, listening to old mariachi music while the sun slowly fell behind the mountains in the west. The warm desert wind gently blew dust and dead sage across the purple and golden mesa. We set out for Santa Fe the next day to play the Palace Saloon. It's one of the oldest establishments in New Mexico, and it used to be a whorehouse. We drank way too much tequila that night. It was Lucas's last show before he went back to work. More sensible people at the bar tried to convince him that he's a fool for leaving the tour. They were buying us 1942 Don Julio shots. Milagro, Patron, whatever we wanted. We got so hammered it became a good idea to go to a club. I stood against the wall with my hands in my dirty, torn coat pockets looking like a serial killer while Lucas fearlessly cut a rug. He was owning the dance floor, sweeping this one beautiful black girl off her feet. They looked like they were in a movie. I know he didn't want to leave. The wild man in him was acting out one last time before he went back to his 9-to-5 cage. We camped on a busy street in Santa Fe that night, woke up hungover and exhausted, and I drove him to his flight in Albuquerque. It was the end of a chapter on this tour. The stage won't be the same without him. We were really getting into a rhythm. People were becoming immediate fans and falling in love with our banter and our story. I figure he'll walk into work Monday morning, sit down for 5 minutes, and immediately walk out, book a flight to where I'm at. It's what I'd do anyways. A year ago to the date, I dropped my girlfriend at the time off in the same fashion. I sent her back to Asheville from Phoenix Airport so she could get back to work while I stayed out on tour. When I got back to Asheville, our relationship had seemingly expired. She was happier out on the road, but she still left. Money makes people do strange things. Invisible chains of fear binding us to monotonous jobs, debt, stick-built prisons, slaves to the landlord, bank, or institution. We waste our lives and time doing things we don't want to do so we can pay for shit we'll never own. It's a sham. The system is rigged. Fuck money. I'm wrapping this one up as I sit in a campground on top of a mountain looking down at Santa Fe. An old retired man's radio is playing faintly some old country song while he sips coffee with his dog at his feet in the campsite next to mine. The wind is blowing lightly through the ponderosa pines and the birds are chirping in the late morning sun. Stay tuned next week for my first solo episode as I dig into the Arizona desert for a cluster of very exciting performances and beautiful hiking. Stay wild and free, y'all.
Lucas goes back to work Saturday. Lucas goes on the road to Alaska Saturday.